Hi guys, it's Izzy and today I'm going to be doing my May wrap up. I read 18 books, 17 books and one graphic novel this month. I'm going to just be doing it in chronological order, starting with the first book I read and the last book I read. And let's get on with the video. So the first book I read this month was The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. Gave this book 5 stars. I loved this book, as I mentioned in my mid-year book freakout tag. It was definitely a massive surprise. I've not been a massive Cassandra Clare fan, but this book follows Magnus and Alec in between City of Glass and City of Fallen Angels as they go on a gallivanting trip around Europe and start to build the foundation of their relationship. This book was just so much fun. Magnus is such a fabulous character. He's so interesting. I love reading from his point of view. His relationship with Alec and the banter that they have is just fantastic, and I loved their relationship. They really built up a lot of trust, and they really learned to rely on each other and to let each other in, and I really loved the development of that. The plot was so interesting. There was so much demon hunting, and it was just such a great adventure. There were so many good characters in it that popped up from Mortal Instruments, and some new characters. The overarching mystery of the cult that Magnus may have started, and what that means for him and the Shadow World, and I really can't wait for the second book. It was just such a fun read, and I was so relieved to have finally found a Cassandra Clare book that I love, because I was feeling a little bit left out of the club because I just could not get into her books, her characters, and I'm really glad that we have this book for Magnus and Alec, because I really didn't like them in the Mortal Instruments. I don't think their relationship was very well done. There wasn't really a lot of trust, and they had so many arguments over very stupid stuff. It just wasn't for me, but this book really changed my opinion on that, so I'm really glad. The next book I read is If You Could Be Mine by Sarah Farizan. I was expecting a little bit more from this book. It's about two best friends who are in love with each other living in Iran. It's about Sahar and how she feels about being in love with her best friend Nasrin, and how her life is going to change now that Nasrin is going to be married to someone else. And I wasn't the biggest fan of this. I think it talked about some really interesting points. I didn't know much about Iran or what was allowed and what wasn't allowed in the country. I thought it was really interesting that being transgender wasn't frowned upon. You were allowed to do that legally. Being gay was not allowed. My main problem with it was we were told Nasrin and Sahar had been in love. Well, Sahar had been in love with Nasrin basically her entire life, but we didn't really at any point see why she loved Nasrin so much. It was sort of just, we were just told that she did, and so I didn't really feel connected to their relationship, because Nasrin didn't seem that great. She wasn't very nice, and I couldn't really see why Sahar was willing to give up everything for her, because we had no foundation for their relationship. We were just told that they had had a relationship for this amount of time, but I didn't feel connected to it at all. I liked Sahar as the main character. She was very stubborn and strong-willed, but it was because she truly believed that what she was doing was the right thing to do, and something that she needed to do, and something that if she didn't do, she couldn't continue with life. So her stubbornness made sense, but overall I just didn't really connect to the book. I think the writing style was quite removed. It didn't really have a very strong voice for Sahar. But overall, I'm glad I read it. I gave it 3 stars. It was a fine read, it just wasn't anything special for me. The next thing I read was Heavy Vinyl by Carly Usdin. This is a graphic novel about a girl who starts a new job at a record store and makes friends, makes love interests. And this, I gave this 5 stars. This was just such a fun read. I loved it. It was so unexpected. I didn't really think that any of the stuff that was that did happen would happen. I loved the art style of this. It was so fun and colourful and really fitted the story. I think it was very clear, and all the characters had such unique styles. I loved the whole dynamic of the group. It was a record store pretty much all run by women, and the friendships that they make were really lovely, and I was so sad that there wasn't any more once I finished, because it was just a lovely graphic novel, and I would definitely read anything else that she put out. The next book I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I didn't actually rate this. I don't really feel comfortable rating non-fiction, specifically biographies, because I mean, you're rating someone's life, which feels a bit weird. So I didn't rate this, but it was basically a 5-star read for me. I loved just learning. I loved the Obamas. I loved learning more about Michelle Obama. I loved learning about her and Barack's history, how she felt about everything once they got into politics, how well they'd managed to navigate their relationships, how hard they tried to navigate the world of parenting, and of course navigating the world of politics. I thought it was so inspiring. It was just such an interesting read. I listened to the audiobook, which was recorded by Michelle Obama, so I think that was a really good way to read it, because having her tell her own story I think really added another layer to it. My only complaint with it was I think the beginning section was a bit too long, like her home life and going into university and her and Barack's early relationship. I really enjoyed learning about that, but I think it could have been cut down a little bit as this is a very long book, but overall it was really good. I love the Obamas and it just made me love them even more, especially Michelle. The next book I read was The Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. I gave this 2 stars, was not a fan of this at all. It was so boring. Like, I went into this just thinking it was about a renowned thief stealing this magical or, you know, sought after object. But this was so dull. It was like, wasn't even 300 pages, but I was so bored. I've never been more bored in my life. I literally was just like, please make it stop. The only reason I got through it was because I had the book and the audiobook, so I just like put the audiobook on like 3 times speed and just skimmed the rest of it because it was painful. The writing style was so detached. We were never inside the main character's mind. There really wasn't anything to the story. Like, we got no voice from Jen. It was pretty much just him going on a travel with like 3 other people, and like nothing even happened on the journey. It was just like them going to somewhere and telling some stories along the way. It was so dull. The characters had like no personality. I was like, so, I mean, put heist in a book and I'm good to go. Like, that's literally all you need to sell me on it. Like, a heist, yeah, I'm signed up, I'm good to go. But this book was just painful. It was painful, and I was so sad. I've already unhauled the book because I just couldn't care less. It was dull as dishwater and I really didn't like the ending, so I will not be proceeding with the next books. The next book I read was Warcross by Marie Lu. As you can tell, I use my library a lot because I read a lot of books. I don't have time to buy all of them. But yeah, I read Warcross. I gave it 3 stars. I was a little bit disappointed because I was really expecting to love it. I thought that the large majority of it would actually take place in, I mean, this is a book about a girl who, there's like an online massive game that everyone uses called Warcross, and she is a hacker, and she, in the opening ceremony for the start of the Warcross Championship, our character Emika accidentally hacks her way into it, and from there she is taken to Japan to take place in the competition as well. I was expecting the large majority of it to be her playing in the game, which is what I was really excited for, because I didn't particularly like Ready Player One. The writing style just wasn't for me, but I did really like the idea of it. And I was kind of hoping this would be like Ready Player One but with better writing, or a writing style more suited to me. But this was just, like, the bits where she was playing in the game were fantastic. I loved them, I didn't want to put it down, but so much of it took place not in the game and just her like not really doing a lot. I also was thinking that because this was like a team scenario, that it would be one of my favourite tropes, found family. I thought she would really bond with her team and really make some lifelong friends, but she barely spoke to her team apart from playing in the game, and she didn't really make any friends, and that really ruined the book a bit for me, because she just, apart from her love interest, she didn't really make any relationships. Also, the mystery was terrible. Like, as soon as we were introduced to the character of Zero, who is an anonymous person that we're trying to find the identity of for the whole book, as soon as we were introduced to a character, I immediately knew that was who Zero was going to be. The plot twist was not surprising for me at all. Like, I guessed it like halfway through the book. It was just, and I was really hoping that I was wrong and that she would do something different, but she did exactly what I predicted, so I was a bit let down by that. Overall, it was a fun read. Like, I didn't have a bad time reading it, but I just didn't really care. And oh my god, the amount of times we are told that Emika has rainbow hair. Like, does she think her readers have amnesia? Like, in the next chapter we suddenly forgot that she had rainbow hair? I don't need to be told 6 million times that she has rainbow hair. I can remember. The whole book's rainbow. We don't need the constant reminder. We're good. That really did annoy me, because we get it. She has rainbow hair. We don't need to be told again. The next book I read was City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I gave this 4 stars. I love everything else that Victoria Schwab has written. This one just didn't particularly grab my attention. I knew I was going to pick it up at some point, I just wasn't on my urgent TBR. But I had a great time reading this. I was quite surprised. I think a lot of criticism came from people because it wasn't what they expected, and that they didn't know it was middle grade, but I don't really think it's the book's fault that people didn't look into the book or what genre or what age it was aimed at, because it's a middle grade. You can't go into middle grade expecting it to be young adult or adult fantasy. But this was just like a really charming but exciting read. It was a really atmospheric scenery in Edinburgh surrounded by ghosts. Literally, what more could you want? This is about a girl called Cassidy who can see ghosts and speak to ghosts, and her parents are ghost hunters. So when they head off to Edinburgh to start a TV show, Ghost Hunting, her life gets a little bit more interesting because Edinburgh is filled with ghosts. I was just so excited to pick this up every time. I loved Cassidy. She was such a interesting and spunky main character. I loved her best friend. Her relationship with Jacob, who's a ghost, was lovely. The adventures they went on were really exciting. in a middle. I mean, if you don't like middle grade, this probably won't be for you, but I love a middle grade from time to time, and if Victoria Schwab wrote it, I know it's going to be great. So I'm really excited for the next book, and I will definitely be picking it up pretty soon after it's released. The next book I read was 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. I gave this 3 stars. I wasn't really expecting much from this book. I knew it was about 2 teenagers with cystic fibrosis and the fact that they can't be in each other's vicinity for cross-contamination of bacteria and things like that. This did disability and illness representation really well. I am personally chronically ill, and I think it was shown really authentically. It felt like what it feels like to be in a hospital. So I really enjoyed that part because it's very rare to find a authentically chronically ill character. The Fault in Our Stars is like the only other young adult one, and I'm not a big fan of that. I like it, but I don't think like illness was shown very authentically. Like, it was quite romantic, and I know books need like a plot to keep it going, so obviously 5 Feet Apart wasn't as like the most realistic because it does need to have a plot to actually be published, whereas The Fault in Our Stars didn't really show what it's like to actually be ill, and 5 Feet Apart definitely did. I just thought it was a little bit dull. Not a lot happened. I didn't really care for the love interest Will. He was a bit bland and just like, I just didn't really care. I didn't really like the death that happened in the book. I didn't think it really added to it, and I think it could have been done differently. But overall, I gave it 3 stars. It was a good read. It just didn't particularly captivate me, but I am glad that they did illness representation really well. The next book I read was Watch Us Rise by Renee Watson and Ellen Hagen. Again, talked about this in my mid-year book freakout tag. I did not like this. I gave it 2 stars. I love feminism. I love feminism books. I love seeing girls really find their place in feminism, and I really did like the character of Jasmine. She carried the entire book. Everything else kind of sucked. I really liked seeing her try and find her own space as a fat black teenager, and really defy the stereotype she's trying to be put into, and just really be herself and nothing more or nothing less. My main problem was with Chelsea. This book claimed to be intersectional, and to some extent it is, but there's like one mention of queer women, there's no mention of disabled women, there's no mention of mentally ill women, no mention of trans women of colour, anything like that. I don't mind if a book wants to focus on a particular section of feminism, like women of colour, but if it claims to be intersectional, I expect it to do that and to mention all of the groups within feminism and all of the different types of women. This only focused on a smaller part, which I didn't really like because it claimed to be for everyone. Also, Chelsea was insufferable. Like, she was a white, able-bodied, thin, cisgendered, heterosexual woman, and she just kept moaning that she'd never been represented, when literally that's all the representation. Like, she is the perfect representation. That's what's represented the most, and she just constantly complained because she had like frizzy hair, and it was just really weird. There were so many changes in tone, because at one point they could be making a really poignant point on feminism, and then they would just switch to Chelsea moaning about her hair. She looked down on women for doing traditionally girly things like wearing makeup, being a fashion stylist, things like that. She only wanted women to be in STEM subjects and frowned upon women who didn't, but then would say that it was fine for her not to do STEM subjects, but like everyone else should be. She just said so many contradictory things about feminism and really looked down on other women, which I wasn't a big fan of. She was entitled, judgy, self-centered, and I really only wanted to read Jasmine's chapters because Chelsea just was awful. The next book I read was The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James by Ashley Herring Blake. This got a 5-star. I loved this book. It was delightful. It was about a girl called Sunny who has a heart transplant and decides that now she's got a new heart, she wants a new life. She's recently fallen out with her best friend, and in this book she starts to make a new best friend. It's about her relationship with her adoptive mother and how that changes once her biological mum comes back on the scene, and it's just really her processing all those different experiences and finding out how she truly feels about them. This was just charming. I was so looking forward to it every time I put on my audiobook. It was middle grade, it's middle grade, she's 12 I think, and I just wanted it in my brain at all times. Sunny was such a great character. She was funny, she was endearing, she was plucky, and she was really fun to follow the point of view of. And I really enjoyed that there was disability and illness rep in a middle grade book. There is far too few illness and disability rep in general, specifically in middle grade as well. I think it needs to be much more prominent. And I think this book did it really well. I loved seeing Sunny's relationship with all the different people in her life, and I just want to read everything Ashley Herring Blake has written. She's such a wonderful writer, and she creates such lovely characters who you really feel attached to and connected with, and that's hard to do because a lot of the time I just don't care about characters, as we've seen from the other wrap-ups that the other books that I've wrapped up so far. The next book I read was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This was a surprising read for me. I didn't really know what it was about. I just knew there was some Shakespeare troupe in it, but this is basically a book about a group of Shakespeare performers who travel around America after a big apocalyptic style event has happened. The population is a millionth of what it used to be, and it's about several characters before and after this event. This was so captivating. Like, as soon as I'd read like the first 50 pages, I was just so drawn in by her writing style. It was like a spell. Like, it just drew me in, kept me engaged the whole time. The way the characters and the story were woven together was exceptional, and I really enjoyed seeing what happened to everyone, what they were like before the event and how they had to change after the event. I did think it was slightly slow at some points. We did get a little bit too much backstory on some people, but overall it was such a captivating read. I just wanted to read it all the time because I was so in awe of how well it was written, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was Never Wild Wake by Marisha Pessl. I tried reading this physically a few months ago and hadn't been able to get into it. I saw the audiobook was available. I thought I would just give it a go because everyone seems to love it. I give this book 3 stars. I don't think it was bad. It just wasn't great. There were times I thought, oh, this is just when it's going to get going, and then it would stop and sort of slow down again. I really liked the atmosphere of this book. It was really well created and really created a mood and a vibe for the book. I also liked a lot of the sections that were like genuinely creepy and a bit unsettling. I thought it was written very well. Technically, I really liked that there was some form of time travel in this. This is a book about a group of teenagers who get stuck in sort of a time loop until they can vote on one person to live and the rest to die. There were some really great scenes in this book, but overall I think it just was too up, too down, and didn't really flow as a cohesive book that well. I didn't really like that there was no foundation to the friendships. Again, this is something that really bothers me, where we're told that people are best friends or in love with each other or whatever, but we haven't actually seen the start of that, the middle of that, how that happened, why they feel like that. And we did not feel why. I didn't know why our main character was even friends with her friend group in the first place. We weren't really told why she was drawn to them, because they kind of just sucked in the present time, so we didn't really see why she'd actually developed those relationships in the first place. So that's what really distanced me from the novel, because I just didn't know why any of them were even in a friend group to begin with. I also really hated the ending. It was such a letdown. It was such a disappointment. The final reveal was I just kept thinking that was a misdirect, and that we were going to end it somehow differently. The mystery was going to reveal a second ending, but it was just a disappointment. So that ruined the book for me a little bit. The next book I read was The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. I gave this book 4 stars, and I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. I'd heard everyone say it was a little bit boring and underdeveloped and just not that entertaining. I personally found the plot really gripping. I was really interested. This is about a town called Four Paths in New York, I believe, and a new girl comes to the town. It's very small, and in it there is a creature called the Grey that is trapped within it and needs to be kept inside his prison. It was just so interesting. This, again, I don't think the foundation for the relationships was there. It took place in a week, and that's what really took it down to a 4-star instead of a 5-star. It just did not have enough time to develop. The main character, Violet, made friends way too quickly with the rest of the characters. They were ready to die for her in basically a week, and I just felt that was really unrealistic and kind of ruined the book a bit for me, because it was just unbelievable. I didn't see why they would go to such lengths to help her. The atmosphere, again, same with Neverwhite Wake, was really, really good. I thought it was really creepy. I definitely felt like I could envisage the place that they were. I felt the danger within it. I was on the edge of my seat at some point, and I really look forward to reading the next book. The final battle of it was also really good. I couldn't stop once I'd started reading it. It was really creepy, it was really interesting, and there were quite a lot of plot twists that I didn't really see coming, and I'm really actually genuinely excited for the second book. So I'm glad I decided to pick it up, even though it didn't have the best reviews. We're on to the final 5 books now, so we're on the home stretch. The next book I read was Love from A to Z by S.K.R. Lee. This is a book about a girl who stands up to her teacher, who is Islamophobic, and gets suspended and is sent to Doha to on a summer break to see her auntie. And I did enjoy it, and also the love interest is struggling with a new diagnosis of MS, multiple sclerosis, which is what his mother died from, and he's struggling with how he can tell his dad and sister about that. I really liked both Zainab and Adam as characters. They had a lot of personality, they had a strong voice. I really felt that they were well balanced characters, both with flaws and likeable things about them. Again, same problem was it just didn't take place over enough time. I think this one was 2 weeks, and they formed a romantic relationship far too quickly, personally, for my taste. That was again what drew me back. Again, she made friends in a very short amount of time, and I just don't find that realistic, because you are not best friends with someone in 2 weeks. It takes time. I really liked the discussion around Islamophobia and how people should go about tackling that. I again really liked the discussion around multiple sclerosis and illness in general, and I really liked that Adam actually asked for help once he told everyone about his diagnosis. I feel like too often in books disabled characters are just shown as like not needing any help. They're still independent, they can still do everything, which is not really realistic. Of course, disabled people are still really independent, but there are things that people need help with, and I liked that Adam actually asked for that help. I gave it 3 stars overall. It was a good read, I just wasn't particularly attached to any of the characters or the storyline. The next book I reread was The Diviners by Libba Bray. I loved this book. It's set in 1920s New York. It follows a group of characters, diviners, who have special abilities, and they have to work together to stop evil and ghosts and save the world, basically. This was a reread. I gave it 4.5 stars. The mystery in this is so creepy. The murders are so creepy. I loved the storyline. The only thing with this is I think it's a little bit slow compared to the second and third book, which, although the second book's longer, it feels much more complex. But Libba Bray is just a genius. She weaves stories together so well. She makes such likeable characters, except for Jericho, as we know. But I'm just obsessed with this series and with Libba Bray and with all her characters. I just want to read it all the time so I can be with these characters all the time. 3 more books to go. The next book I read was Little Monsters by Kara Thomas. This is about a girl whose best friend goes missing after her other best friend and sister have performed a seance. They don't know what happened to her, and it's obviously a mystery thriller following what happened to her. This book was, again, okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was, like, I enjoyed my time reading it. I thought it was interesting. It kept me engaged. I don't think it was the most layered or complex mystery or thriller. It felt quite like basic mystery and thriller. I think it's a good one if you're not particularly into mystery and thriller and you want to try it out. I really think what Kara Thomas did really well is capturing a teenage style voice and the way teenagers interact with their peers. So often authors try and be down with the kids, given their slang, trying to pretend like they know how teenagers speak, which a lot of the time ends up being very cringy. So I appreciated how well Kara Thomas did it. It didn't feel overdone, it just felt very natural, and I think it wasn't too mature or too immature at the same time, so I thought that was done really well. I think some of it went on way too long and got a little bit boring, but I do think the mystery was interesting and I didn't totally guess it, which is always good because I've got pretty good at guessing mystery and thrillers at this point, so it's always nice when you can be surprised a little bit. Oh, and I actually gave it 3.5 stars because it was just a little bit better than average, and I would recommend it. It was like a okay read. The next book I read was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I don't know how you say that name. I gave this 3 stars again. This was a real month of 3-star reads. This book was fun. It's about a girl whose dad is missing and she meets 3 like magical witches and goes on an adventure to find her dad with her brother and a new friend. This book was quite magical. I thought the writing was done really well. Like Madeleine said, children can understand a lot more than they're given credit for, and this was a very mature middle grade book, and I think at no point it talked down to children or acted like they didn't know things that they would know. So I thought it was written really well. I thought it had an interesting storyline, but overall there were just, even though it was quite a short book, it was just kind of a bit lackluster for me. I'm a big fan of middle grade, so it's not the fact that it was written for children, or like young people, but it just didn't really capture me, didn't really give me a lot of magical feelings, so it was just sort of average for me. Again, it was a fun read. I didn't hate it by any strength of the imagination, but it was just okay. I don't think I'll be continuing on with the series because it just didn't really do it for me. And the final book I read in the month of May was We Set the Dark on Fire by Telo Kemeha. I butchered that name, no idea how you say it, sorry. This book I gave 4 stars. It is about a girl. It's set in a different universe where women go to school to learn to serve men. Each man has 2 women, a Primera and Segunda, one who is more for like the marriage side of things, and one who is supposed to be his equal in political matters and sort of general business. It's sort of like a secretary, but not quite. And it is about our main character, Dani, as she is put into her house as a Primera, and she is put in with another girl called Carmen, who is the Segunda, who she hated, but whose relationship developed into something more as the story continues. And Dani is asked to join a rebel group to spy on the man who she has been promised to, or the man who she lives with as a Primera. And it's, at first she refuses because she wants to make the most of what her parents worked so hard to give her. It's all about self-preservation for her, which seemed really natural because she just wanted to make sure that what her parents had given up was worth it. So it made a lot of sense that at first she didn't really want to be part of that, to jeopardise anything that, you know, her life had become or what her parents had given up for her to have. But it then follows as this rebel group tries to take down the government, which prioritises the very rich, and everyone else is kind of left to starve and die from medical issues, etc. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really interesting. I really liked the relationship between Dani and Carmen. I really liked Dani as a main character. She made a lot of sense, and because she was Primera, she was trained in keeping her emotions to herself and putting on sort of a facade at all times, which I really liked. It really added something else to her character and made the situation she was in even more interesting because she didn't always have to show what she felt. Overall, it was just a really interesting read, and I'm actually really looking forward to the second one. The ending was not my favourite, but I'm hoping it'll be improved in the second book. But yeah, that is all 18 books I read this month. Thank goodness we finished. This is going to be a long one. Thank you so much for watching. My Twitter and Goodreads will be down in the description, and I'll see you next time. Bye!